Secondly, he takes critique with the earthquake connection not being related to high frequency.
That video, Project NOAA Executive Director Dr. Mahar Lagmay tweets the statements were, quote, incredible and illogical. He now joins us on the line to tell us more. Good afternoon, Dr. Lagmay.
Hi, PJ. Good afternoon.
Well, obviously, you've seen the video yourself. As Carmina and I were talking about it earlier, to many who are not as educated in your field may believe it. But is this true? Is there a possibility that a microwave pulse from any ultramagnetic, machine or satellite can trigger anything like that to disturb the weather?
Well, I think those claims that he was giving before he could relate the microwave to the cyclone or to the typhoon that hit the Philippines, he must first demonstrate that the microwave was the one who formed it. Mm-hmm. From the images that he was showing, it would appear that the typhoon was already developed when he was showing the microwave pulses that were being transmitted. Mm-hmm. And the second thing that I noticed was that he was also relating the microwave pulses with the occurrence of earthquakes. Mm-hmm. And what we know about earthquakes is that they form because of the accumulation of energy due to Earth movement, and through time, this energy is accumulated along faults. Mm-hmm. And it does not at all relate to any type of microwave that he was referring to. And in that sense, I would think that that person who keeps on stating or mentioning the word Stanford to boost his credibility, I think is just pulling a trick on us.
Okay.
And that's blatantly incorrect. And in my response, I will put a link down below so that the good scientist, the good doctor, can go read up on what's called efficiency scaling. And it's in my whole post here on electromagnetic spectrum, which you guys can come check, covering HARP, radar, high frequency, low frequency, very high frequency, the difference between them and what their effects are. And they're being turned into weapons. The doctor might not know this, that when a high frequency is emitted from a transmitter, it goes up into the Earth's atmosphere and ionosphere. It then modulates, cross-modulates naturally, the Earth does it, into a low frequency. That's how they're able to generate low frequency using a place like HARP, let's say, or even from a radar. And so it is my contention when a high frequency is generated that indeed the resonance takes place, that the wave spreads out over a distance, forms into a low frequency just like they tell us efficiency scaling does, and there's your low frequency generated from high frequency. It's how they're able to generate ELF, extremely low frequency, using HARP, the high frequency active aurora research program. And this is all documented. You guys can go look this up yourselves. Now, he then brings up Stanford. Of all things, he had to bring up Stanford and saying that I'm name-dropping Stanford in my video. Well, I encourage you guys to come over and check this video that he's talking about, and I'm showing in the video Climate Viewer, which is Google Earth, and it's overlaid with all the electromagnetic stations that we know of, and you can look at them and see where they are on the planet Earth. And I'm showing that in the video, and Stanford VLF is a program that the U.S. government sponsors, and it's through EDU, a college here in the United States, Stanford, and they run a whole program where they bounce VLF signals using high frequency from HARP. Here we go, Stanford Star Labs HARP website. I mean, I'm just showing you guys what they have done. Here's the Wayback Machine. It goes back into the 90s. Here we are back in the year 2000. They have a website up explaining how they operate, how they generate VLF using high frequency. Now we know very low frequency is used for something called earth penetrating tomography. Now we're going to get very technical here. Earth penetrating tomography is a way to look into the earth using waves, radio waves. And just like a bass speaker in a car will travel through, the bass sound will travel through the car and you'll hear it inside of your house, The same phenomenon happens on an even lower frequency. You can penetrate the Earth's crust and see oil deposits, underground bases, tunnels, those sorts of things. And this is all stuff that's documented here on my website. I've spent 3 years putting this information together with dozens of other researchers. We have page 1 and page 2. Page 2 is even longer than page 1. We can go through each description. You can see the earthquake connection. And just in case you don't believe me, I'm going to go ahead and play a video now where you can hear it from a doctor who specializes in the subject, who was on the History Channel. Okay? So we'll watch this video next where Dr. Brooks Agnew explains how to make an earthquake, and then we'll get back into the rest of the response. Oh, one final thing before we get into this. Their other claim at the start of the video, they're asking, did he fabricate this? Did he fabricate this? All the links are from .gov institutional websites, guys. And they were all originally provided.
Dr. Agnew experienced the power of ELF waves firsthand back in the 1980s. He was hired by an energy company to locate oil and gas using the same kind of ELF waves at much lower frequencies to carry out his search. It's a process called earth tomography. But during one particular incident, Dr. Agnew believes his use of HAARP-like ELF waves accidentally triggered an earthquake.
It was in the spring of 1987 we arrived in Roseburg, Oregon to use our ELF technology to search for oil and gas. Setting up that day, we had a little bit different results than we expected because the instant that we energized it, there was between a 4 and 4.5 on the Richter scale earthquake that occurred. We were so amazed about what seemed to be cause and effect. We get to an area that has a high propensity for earthquakes in an area known as the megathrust of the Pacific Northwest. We turn it on and an earthquake occurs.
Dr. Agnew demonstrates how he may have triggered the quake.
This is a scale model of what the area looked like in Oregon when we scanned for oil and gas in 1987. This strata right here represents the megathrust area underneath the ground. The rock represents a potential energy set up in the ground from a tectonic stress. What we're going to do is introduce ELF waves and demonstrate that it can in fact trigger an earthquake.
In this case, Dr. Agnew is using a stereo speaker to produce the ELF waves needed for his demonstration.
ELF waves, extremely low frequency waves, are just like a subwoofer. In your car, you can actually feel the vibrations through your body. ELF waves are the same way. They vibrate the earth, and at right resonant frequencies, they can have devastating effects.
When the speaker is activated, ELF waves begin to emit. Tiny vibrations in the sand are detected. Then a few seconds later, the rock representing a fault line shifts.
As you can see, in a very few seconds, the resonant frequency built up in our model released the potential energy in the rock. That concussion, on a real scale, would have been felt for 100 miles. These conditions are already set up in the ground. All it takes is the activation energy to make the release happen. This is a small scale, and we're only using 30 watts in this scale.
When HAARP's broadcast array in Gakona, Alaska sends pulses of ELF waves into the ionosphere, the waves get reflected back down and pass through the Earth and ocean. If 3.6 million watts of ELF waves were purposely or accidentally aimed at an already unstable fault line, it could, according to Dr. Agnew, cause a tremendous earthquake.
You know, looking at just simple instabilities, you know, what does it take to create an avalanche? A guy walking across an unstable ice field. What does it take to trigger an earthquake? The right signal coming in when the pressures are already built up and they're at their threshold. That feather, and in our case that hammer, releases that energy.
And in that sense, I would think that that person who keeps on stating or mentioning the word Stanford to boost his credibility, I think is just pulling a trick on us.
Okay, so now we're getting a little bit more frisky here. Let's get into some of these claims, and he's starting to take a little bit more of a aggressive tone towards me there at the end. But let's get into this. He says it must be demonstrated well. And then they ask, is microwave related to cloud forming? Which he says, no, it is not scientifically possible. And he asked to see the evidence, and he said it has to be demonstrated over and over again. Well, since people don't click the links down below the videos and don't bother to check the posts that have been made over the last 2 years and refuse to listen to me personally, I'm going to go ahead and include the next round of videos where you can hear it from the talking heads on TV, where they fully explain how frequency can induce CCN, which is cloud condensation nuclei, the precursor to rain. And what you're going to hear Dr. Michio Kaku explain to you in a second is summed up as such: that frequency strips electrons from the atmosphere, which then act like dust particles, like nature would build a raindrop, but instead of a dust particle, it's actual base charge in the atmosphere that attracts molecules to form chains upon themselves. It's amazing. And he explains it, and he talks about the potential uses for the weather modification as sporting events and weddings. Okay? So you have to watch this video and hear it from him, because people aren't hearing it from me. They refuse to hear it from me. They call me a conspiracy theorist. Is Michio Kaku a conspiracy theorist? I don't think so. I mean, what is it going to take? Bill Nye the Science Guy to come out next? Really, here's Michio Kaku explaining it and the current U.S. military operations that are doing it. We're going to also get into the scientific experiments that have been done that prove microwaves induce rotation. Here's the Weather Channel. We're going to prove that the U.S. Navy already did it at the start of this year in the atmosphere using HAARP. Massive superheated areas. We're going to prove that radar can do it through places like SPEAR, transmission of electricity, heating at a distance. Once all that's proved, I think that's going to pretty much settle the debate, and the doctor and other professionals are going to have to do some reading. They're behind the times, clearly behind the times, or playing a cover-up game. Those are the only two options. Either he doesn't know, or he's obfuscating the facts. Those are the only two logical options, and I take, again, umbrage with being called illogical. I'm from Missouri in the States. Most people don't know we have a state motto for each state. Our state motto here in Missouri, which we all take very seriously, I'm not kidding here, show me. Show me means we won't believe it until you show us. We're the doubting Thomases of the world.